You used as 2 of your 5 facts or pieces of evidence supporting your case, Joseph of Arimathea and the testimony of women.
Yes.
You said that their historical unlikeliness makes your case more, or gives credit to your case. I would argue that their unlikeliness actually serves better to support Mark's message, the Christian message, that they're more likely put in there to show Christians reading the Gospels and people hearing the epistles and everything, that Christians should be inclusive, that, not all Jews, like Joseph of Arimathea, not all Jews are Christ killers, and not all women are crazy, and that. So how do you respond to that?
Yeah, well, I think you're reading. I think you're reading 21st century Western political correctness into the Gospels, trying to show that they're so inclusivistic and everything, and I think that's utterly foreign to their concerns. With respect to Joseph of Arimathea, remember his existence is multiply and independently attested, as well as being highly unusual in the sense that the Christians would hardly invent somebody who's a Sanhedrist, all of whom Mark says condemn Jesus, who then does what's right by Jesus in giving him a burial in the tomb. So given this, it's a cumulative case. It's not based on any single fact. It's the cumulative force of all of these, I think, that suggests to the vast majority of scholars that the burial narrative is historical. And with respect to the women witnesses, again, it's incontrovertible that the testimony of women was not as highly prized in first century Judaism as the testimony of men. And so a late legendary account would in all probability make men discovered the empty tomb, because any conceivable role played by women would be more aptly played by men and give more credible testimony. I think the reason that women are the discoverers of the empty tomb is very much like those Josephine examples. That was the only witnesses there were. These were the ones they had. These were the ones who really did it, and therefore the Gospels faithfully record it.
Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Carrier, the naturalistic explanation you gave for the post-mortem appearance of Christ to people is that of mass hallucinations. Some quotes by you tonight are, the Christians were regularly hallucinating, Christians were prone to hallucinating, they did it all the time, and other cults facing failure with no other way to move on also relied on this. You failed to address the fact that Paul, who is not a member of this alleged cult, had one of these, quote, hallucinations while he was actually on his way to arrest some Christians. And you didn't address the fact that his life was radically different afterwards, how he was hunted, nearly arrested, had to escape imminent death in multiple situations, and he ultimately did die in a cell proclaiming the word of Christ. As a man who probably would consider himself logical, how could you say that his life after this, quote, hallucination could be possibly attributed to nothing other than the transformative powers of God and merely to a hallucination?
Well, I think Paul genuinely believed. Paul genuinely believed what he saw. I don't think Paul thought it was a hallucination, obviously. When he hallucinated Jesus communicating to him the gospel, he actually believed this was really the case. So obviously it would transform his life in all the ways that you described, because he actually thought that had actually happened. He believed it. The question is, why would Paul have that hallucination? I advance particular theories in the empty tomb as to why that might be, but I think the more important point is that why only Paul, of all the persecutors of the church? Why none of the leading persecutors of the church? Why no other persecutors of the church? Why was it just one guy? And I think the reason being is that precisely because it's unusual, it would be uncommon, let's say, statistically a low frequency of particular persecutors coming to realize, for example, that they actually agree with the Christian message, their moral message, for example, and start to feel guilt, for example, about persecuting the church. You can come up with explanations like that as particular psychological reasons why. You can come up with several. We don't know enough information about what Paul actually was thinking at the time to actually know. So the question really is, statistically what's going to be the case. Statistically, if there's going to be any psychological explanation for Paul to suddenly have this revelation to himself and convince himself that the Christians are right and that Jesus is actually was risen from the dead and so forth, whatever explanation that might be, it's going to be uncommon. And the fact that Paul is extremely uncommon, in fact, he's unique. There's only one persecutor of the church that this happened to. I think that confirms the prediction of my theory that what we're looking at are unique psychological conditions that actually inspired Paul to have this hallucination. And the fact that Paul is alone confirms that prediction. Whereas if you take the theory, and against Craig, what he was saying earlier, that I do think the issue of whether Jesus would appear to all people is historically relevant. It's not a theological point. I'm not talking philosophy here. I'm talking about what predictions do his theory make that are different from predictions that my theory make. Now, if his theory predicts that Jesus is just going to appear in exactly the same place and way and manner that natural theories would also predict, then there isn't any way to tell the difference between natural explanations of the facts and his explanation of the facts, and consequently, we can't decide between them and we can't claim his theory is known. His theory has to make predictions that are different from the predictions made by the naturalistic theories, and those predictions have to come true, whereas the naturalistic predictions have to come false. And that doesn't come to the fore here. And we have a situation with Paul where I think is a classic example of that. The fact that Jesus only appeared to one outsider confirms the naturalistic explanation, because that's exactly what naturalism predicts. Whereas the fact that Jesus didn't appear, if Jesus could have appeared, let's put it that way, Jesus could have appeared to everyone on earth, and as I mentioned earlier, had he done so, I would probably be convinced by the evidence of it, because there would be a tremendous amount of evidence confirming this thing that would have no other naturalistic explanation in my view, or at least no easy naturalistic explanation. So that's what I'm talking about when I say Jesus could appear to everyone. I'm not saying Jesus had to appear to everyone, or they necessarily would have. I'm saying that that's the kind of thing that you would expect for that particular kind of theory. Jesus wants people to have this message. Obviously, if I wanted people to have a particular message that's going to transform their life, make their lives better, and I had the means to appear to everyone and give them a short discussion of this and give them some sort of evidence that this is really the thing they should follow, I would do so. But obviously, I can't be more compassionate or more intelligent than God. So if God also had the same desire, and that means he would have done so. So I say this is a prediction of Craig's theory that is actually falsified by the historical evidence. And that's the position I take with regard to your question and its relation to other topics like that.